Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Happiest CEO podcast. I'm Sebastian, and today I'm joined by someone who is making a huge impact in the world of health and wellness, Charley O'Halloran. And Charley is a gut expert and the founder of Holistic Gut Health, one of the fast growing platforms on Instagram and TikTok, where he practices and explains anything that is related to gut health. And he has done an amazing job of educating people worldwide on gut health. I'm so excited to have him here. The education platform is the Gut Health Hub. And I'm sure we dive into all sorts of things. So, Charley, welcome to the Happiest CEO. I'm really looking forward to diving into your journey, your philosophy, and what real gut health is looking like.
Thanks for having me, Sebastian. I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. So this is quite a specific topic that you chose to make your vocation. Is there any particular reason why you got into this, or were you just interested in sort of the microbes and the biology and anything that is related to that, or was there a trigger in your life where you said, I need to figure this out?
Yeah, it was definitely from my own experiences and my own challenges and how gut health changed my overall health and really the direction of my life as a whole. I actually started off studying exercise science in university, and because I was really passionate about exercise and training in the gym, so I thought that's where I wanted to go. And when I was studying exercise science, I also started to study personal training and became a personal trainer. And then as I was studying exercise science, I realized that I didn't really want to go down this, this kind of lab route. The career options were kind of limited, and I really wanted to work with people more so. So I just focused fully into personal training, and that was amazing. I did that for 6 or 7 years, but then a couple of things happened. Basically, my own personal health started to really decline. The writing was on the wall for a few years, but I started to just feel really fatigued. I was really struggling with depression and anxiety. I had all these random symptoms like cold hands and feet, pins and needles, heart palpitations. I couldn't sleep. So I was really concerned about that. When I went and saw doctor, cardiologist, a few specialists, and didn't really get any answers. I was just told that it was normal. And then I started to look more into, that's when I kind of discovered functional medicine and kind of got my bloods analyzed from a functional perspective, started to understand gut health a little bit better, which was already, this was around 2018, 2019. Like gut health was starting to get a bit of traction. I'd personally read a few books and stuff, but didn't really understand that much about it. And realized that a lot of my health problems were actually stemming from my gut. And then I started to, this is around COVID time, I started to work on my own gut health personally and see the changes with that, and realized, there's actually something to this, and I could potentially help my clients as well get better results because I was just helping them with exercise and nutrition. So I started to help them with their gut health, and then really started to go all in on, more functional medicine and gut health. And I think just natural progression, like my own experiences, started to attract these kind of people, started to get really good results with these clients. And then, essentially, I think it just kind of went from there. And now gut health is such a mainstream thing. Gut health has become so much more popular over the last few years. I think especially since COVID, which has been awesome. But yeah, I think it's also a little bit misunderstood to a degree sometimes as well.
What do you find the misperceptions mainly are? Like, what are the topics where people really, where, maybe public knowledge overall is just not quite on par yet?
I think that a lot of people just don't understand how nuanced it is. Like, we
Meaning
still have quite a...
depends on the person and each an individual.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely how individualized gut health can be.
Yeah.
So, for example, like there's a lot of talk about fiber and prebiotics and probiotics, which are really good. And there's a lot of research around these. But a lot of this stuff kind of doesn't apply necessarily to people who might already have these underlying gut health issues. So we need to understand that, just the advice of eat more fiber, take a probiotic, first off, that might make some people worse if they already have imbalances there and problems. And then secondly, that might not be enough. There can be a lot of other kind of dysfunctions that might also be driving someone's symptoms. So for example, they might have significant damage to their gut lining. They might have poor digestive function. They might have things like low stomach acid, bile flow. And that's where I think we need to take more of a holistic approach towards gut health. So rather than just focus only on the microbiome, which is, the bacteria within the gut, and trying to increase that, we need to think of the body as a whole and think about all these different things that interconnect to gut health. For example, a lot of people love to do things like stool tests. They love to do things like breath tests, colonoscopies. These things are just looking at the gut, right? But that kind of fails to recognize the impact that the brain might be having, fails to recognize the impact that, lifestyle and emotions and nervous system might have, and even things like thyroid, immune system, nutrient deficiencies, all of these other factors that also play a role with gut health. So that's where, I'm big on, thinking about the person as a whole and our gut health. Because a lot of people understand, like they say that everything starts in the gut. I think Hippocrates said that 2,000 years ago.
Right.
And a lot of people are starting to think that the gut health is the answer to all of their health problems, which it probably plays a role, but it goes both ways. So all these other systems in the body also influence the gut. So we can't just expect to fix the gut. We're going to fix everything else. Sometimes we also have to think about other factors that might be contributing to the gut too.
Yeah, right. So if I experience any of the what are the issues that I would experience? I mean, what comes to mind is leaky gut. And I've been in a talk once about sort of like gut health, and I remember they're saying, "Oh, leaky gut is actually really specific, a specific medical condition which is really really rare, but the public uses it for when the digestion is not really working." Is that how it is?
I think so leaky gut is kind of like the mainstream dumbed down way of saying intestinal permeability. So it's kind of like, if we go around saying intestinal hyperpermeability, people are going to be like, what the hell is that? Leaky gut kind of, it makes more sense. But then when a lot of people think of leaky gut, they think of they've got holes in their gut lining and it's leaking. And, that's obviously not really what it's referring to. It's referring to like this lining, the gut lining, the cells that make up the gut lining. There can be widening there, and there can be all kinds of different damage that's occurred to those cells, and even the cells that go kind of layers below that as well. So I think it's a broad term. I think that I think it's more common than what it kind of gets recognition for.
Okay.
And I think that it definitely plays a role more of the time than others. And this is another thing, right? So like you can have imbalances in your gut microbiome, and that's one thing, but then you can, for example, take probiotics, trying to increase this. It's not going to fix the leaky gut. And I think leaky gut, intestinal permeability, to be more specific, does also needs to be supported at the same time.
Gotcha. So when people come to you and have recognized that something is not quite right, well, have they recognized that something is not quite right in their digestion, or while you work maybe also on their performance and on their overall health, do you recognize then for them that, hey, actually you're looking in the wrong place? Your chronic fatigue or your foggy mind is actually related to how you eat or what you don't do or do wrong?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was the case for me. I didn't actually go into looking into my gut health and functional medicine, seeking out this, thinking that it was my gut health. I had depression, I had anxiety, I had brain fog, I had insomnia, I had poor circulation, had a whole laundry list of things going on.
Yeah.
I did have bloating and I did have gas as well, but I almost thought that was just normal.
Gotcha.
So what a lot of people that will come to us, they do know that they have gut health problems because they're so far down the line that they're now starting to experience some significant kind of bloating, constipation, diarrhea, pains, discomfort, these digestive symptoms. But I think what I said to you earlier when the writing was on the wall for me a few years before that, I think a lot of people are still yet to connect that a lot of these other symptoms, like the brain fog, like the poor memory, like the joint pain, these are the earlier symptoms of potentially gut health challenges.
Gotcha.
And then as it progresses further and further, actually later on is when some of these digestive symptoms start to pop up. So a lot of people, I think, shouldn't wait until they have these digestive symptoms to then be like, oh, I've got gut health problems. they should be really trying to take a proactive approach and support their gut health earlier on, because that's going to improve their quality of life and help them get to more of an optimal state, rather than just trying to fix this problem that they have later on, but it's already quite severe at that point. So, and that's what I think people sometimes fail to recognize. It's like, oh, I can just fix my gut in a few weeks, or, a 14-day cleanse, or, a 4-week, reset or whatever. But if you've got these significant gut health problems, then that has probably been kind of ticking away for a few years, if not decades.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a bit of time to rectify that completely.
Gotcha. And what exactly, how do you, I mean, it's unreal. I can follow you when you say, look, you can't just look at your gut itself. It's basically part of a bigger system, and therefore it affects all different things, and other things affect also the gut. That makes sense to me. You can't see it in isolation. But how can the gut trigger so many different problems, for people to have a quality life? And how is that? Like, what are some of the well understood connections between, well, when I think about gut, I think about digestion. Like, is that even the proper language, or would you say, look, yes, it's digestion, but it's much more than that?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Like, people talk about, when you say the term gut health, people think about, just digestion.
Yeah.
But if we think about the whole gastrointestinal system, that encompasses the mouth, the teeth. There's a microbiome of bacteria within the mouth too. And then you've got, it comes down, you've got your stomach. But then when it passes from the stomach into the small intestine, you've got the liver and the gallbladder secreting bile. So then you've got small intestine, you've got large intestine. So then there's a full system there for starters. But then coming back to your question, how the gut intercommunicates with these other systems, like, a lot of people have heard of the gut to brain axis, and how the gut and the brain are always communicating, and that's via the vagus nerve. So there's messages sent both ways, and actually about 70 to 90% of the messages along this vagus nerve, which is kind of the highway between the brain and the gut, are actually going from the gut to the brain, not the other way around. So the gut is actually sending far more messages upward to the brain and influencing mental health or mental function compared to the other way around. So I find that interesting, because that all opens up the conversation, because a lot of people talk about, is the gut the second brain? And it's kind of like, well, is it actually the first brain? Is it having more of an impact on who we are and how we think than what we realize? And there's heaps of these different axes, right? So there's not just the gut to the brain. There's also the gut to skin axis. So the gut and the skin are always in communication. And a lot of people in functional medicine will say that the skin is a window to the gut. So basically what you're seeing on the external presentation of the skin is actually a reflection of what's going on in the gut. You've got the gut to endocrine. So that's the gut to hormonal axis. You've got the gut to liver axis. And we've seen these interconnections between, like, gut health and things like fatty liver disease, for example. We've got the gut to heart axis, gut to lung axis. There's so many different axes, and there's even more. There's like gut to muscle, gut to bone, gut to eye. So again, we're talking about all these different axes, and potentially how the specialist model lets people down, because with a specialist, you're going to go and see an endocrinologist, for example, for your hormones, but it's only looking at the hormones. Or you're going to see a rheumatologist for your joints, but only your joints, and it doesn't take into the consideration the system as a whole.
Yeah. And I'm reading at the moment Why We Get Sick by Benjamin, what's his name? Benjamin Bigman. And they talk a lot about basically the resistance to insulin, right? And when you were talking about all the different connections, which I believe are sort of nerve connections, right? Mostly.
Yes.
There's also this, when we talk about insulin, which is a hormone, it basically affects all parts of the body as well. And I found that fascinating, because they actually track most of them, well, all of them, the main issues that we have nowadays in terms of health, long-term health issues, back to that as well, which comes really from what you eat and how you eat things. But I guess in a roundabout way, when I think about evolution, it must be that basically the body gives what we eat a lot of credit and a lot of importance to say, you inform us how we're doing and what we need to do, because really this is how we fuel the body. I guess that would be one of my theories.
I like that. Yeah, definitely. And I think what a lot of people, with all the noise and the confusion at the moment, try to cling to is there's one solution for all problems. Like it's a magic bullet. So
Right.
for example, they want to believe that
Yes.
the gut, everything starts in the gut, because that makes it feel more simple. It makes it feel like, oh, I just fix the gut. Or,
Yeah.
for example, it's just insulin, or it's just hormones, or it's just environment, mold, heavy metals, parasites, it's never going to be just one individual thing, unfortunately. And that's where people got to understand the nuance, and we have to take an individualized approach. But yeah, you're spot on with how and this comes down to another philosophy that I didn't make up, but with the top-down method, which kind of thinks about the digestive system from a top-down approach, and how everything starts in the mind, and this, your emotions and your stress levels and your thoughts influence your digestive system massively. And that kind of comes back to what you were saying about how the body puts a lot of resources into digestion, but if it can. So if it can't, so if the body's, for example, if we're stressed, for example, we need the first priority in an instance of survival, when we talk about the nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, the rest and digest versus the fight or flight, is we need to make a decision. So we need brain function, right? So we need to be able to think like, do I run away, or do I flight, or do I fight? So brain gets first priority, but then secondly, it is actually, muscle, right? It's like insulin, it's glucose shuttling so that we can move.
Yeah.
So if you're stressed, then you're always in this stressed state, then your digestive system is always going to be kind of downstream. It's kind of not getting the energy prioritization that it needs, because the body thinks that it's got to be kind of fight or flight. So that's why it's so important to think like, am I just too stressed? Am I kind of in this activated sympathetic nervous system? And is that simply the answer to my gut health problems? And it can be that simple, right? For a lot of our clients, like it's actually their nervous system and their thoughts and their stress and their emotions and maybe their past trauma that is having a massively negative impact on their gut. And unfortunately, because that's been going on for many years, that's actually caused physical problems with the gut too. So they do need to fix their gut at the same time, but they also need to recognize the impact that their nervous system is having on it. So yeah, I took that a little bit of a different direction, but that's the way it always goes.
It's all right. Look, something that I've connected some time ago is that I can see people who work on their traumas, or who's still in trauma and battle with sort of getting over, whatever happened to them, whatever they experience, whatever that they can't quite digest, if you like, that there is also a component of, and I have problems with my gut, and I can't use, I can't eat this, I can't eat that. And it seems to be a little bit of a theme that the mind has power over the gut that way. And I would hope, and that's, again, a theory that you probably have seen, hopefully be true, that when people actually fix, that stress of that trauma, because it's also a type of stress, that then the digestion comes back to, and the gut comes back to more normal swing.
Definitely. It can, like I said, it can go a bit of both ways, because like, for sure, that can help a lot. And sometimes, though, if it's been a long time, like being in that state has then caused damage to the gut. So, for example, in my scenario, like I had these mental health challenges. I had depression, I had anxiety, I had brain fog.
Yeah.
And I'd actually seen a psychologist for about 3 years. And before that, I'd been on antidepressant medication.
Gee.
And that probably had an impact onto my gut as well. But it wasn't until, so that helped, definitely. I'm not taking away from that. It was a really important part of my journey too. But then it wasn't until I actually worked on my gut health to then have kind of the raw components, I guess, and my physical body in a state where I could think more clearly, think more positively. So that's that two-way communication, right? So it's sometimes a big part of it for most people, if they do have past trauma or they are highly stressed, is to work through that and just recognize that. Because if you try to ignore that, it just becomes like a roadblock. Like if you have that kind of simmering away and you're trying to ignore it and you're just trying to only focus on your gut by taking supplements or fixing your diet, that'll help a little bit. But you won't be able to move forward to where you want to be without addressing that at the same time. On the flip side, though, you could potentially see a psychologist for 20 years and work through all these psychological things and actually be in a really good place there. But then underlying, if your gut microbiome's imbalanced, if you have damage to like leaky gut, for example, then you're fighting an uphill battle to a degree. So that's where that two-way synergistic approach, I always say to clients, like, we want to be supporting both at the same time. We want to support the gut so that we can support the brain, and we want to support the brain so we can support the gut.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think back to your point around, you need to run away from the tiger. One of the mechanisms when you are in stress and when you think, you really need to give all the energy to the muscles is basically that digestion is not really important. And therefore, it will not run on all cylinders. It will really give the energy to the muscles and to whatever makes you get away from the tiger. But the modern life, unfortunately, the tiger is something that is permanently there, and it's not really a threat in the moment. It's the thought of whatever trauma, but also stress of work or whatever have you. So I get it. So you work, if you don't get in a rest and digest mode, it will be impossible to really get to a really vibrant place again.
Yeah, exactly. It's literally in the name. Like, digest is in the name of what we kind of refer to the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
And you're spot on that, like, going back hundreds, thousands of years, for example, like, that was the default. And then if there was a stressor, for example, a tiger or saber-toothed tiger back then, for it's an example that everyone always uses, then we go into the sympathetic, fight or flight. But then the default is back to the parasympathetic. Whereas now the default is basically parasympathetic, and there's always these constant stresses from information, basically, whether that's social media, news, or work, always around you. Whereas, and you have to deliberately get into the parasympathetic. And that's where these practices like breathing, going out into nature, meditation, that deliberate effort is really important.
Yeah, powerful. When you see people, do you have a sort of like a protocol that you would start with to actually figure out what's going on? Like, would it be a test thing, or would it be a trial thing, or would it be actually figuring out where they're mentally at? How would you go about of helping people?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think that there's two main ones that you kind of want to work synergistically or kind of take into consideration. And it's the data and it's the detail. So it's like understanding the person and how they're presenting and their symptoms and as an individual. So, you and someone else might have similar symptoms, for example, but you've got completely different lifestyles, right? You've got different histories, you've got different mindsets, you've got different day-to-days. So we have to take that into consideration and not just think, oh, these two people both have bloating, so they got the same problem.
Right.
So understand the person. It's really important to treat the person, not the condition or the symptom, and then combine that with data to get a deeper insight. So this is where testing comes into it.
Okay.
And this is why I would never just base a treatment plan just off testing either, because we need to understand the person. So testing is helpful, but we can get into this. It's a little bit of an interesting one that I talk about sometimes. A lot of practitioners really love functional testing. They love to do things like stool test, Dutch test, oat test, microtox test, breath test, all these different tests. And we have to understand their limitations and how validated they actually are by evidence, first and foremost. I am a big fan of blood testing, like functional blood testing and blood analysis, because we know that blood tests are validated by science, but then we have to look between the lines a little bit more to get what we want to find out from bloods. So, for example, we know that blood tests are reliable, but we know that also the ranges that the medical profession, doctors and things like that use are generally not that well associated with actually what's the best possible health outcome you can get. It's more to do with the averages. So if a population of people get their blood tested, then those normal ranges are based off just the average. So where 95% of the people who got tested fall into. So if everyone who was unhealthy, for example, got their blood tested, that means that the average is just going to be much wider, and it doesn't mean that that's actually what's healthy. So we've got to look a little bit deeper, and that's where functional and optimal ranges can come into it. And then understanding patterns and correlations within that as well. So a lot of the time, practitioners will look at only an individual blood marker. So for example, they'll look at iron. Okay, you have low iron, we must need to give you more iron. But we kind of got to go a little bit deeper and think about why is the iron low? It's more of a root cause approach.
Yeah.
And then secondly, what is the iron also, what else is going on in the bloods, right? Like, is there inflammation driving down the iron, or is it simply this person's vegetarian, they don't consume much iron? So like, it's again, understanding, and there's every blood marker applies to this. And that comes back to my point around why I love blood markers, coming back to what we spoke about earlier, is like, if we do a stool test, which I'm not opposed to a stool test, they have a place, but we're only looking at the gut, right? We're only looking at the gut microbiome, any infections we might have, and maybe inflammation. Whereas blood markers will give us, if you know what to look for, you can see signs of gut health problems within blood markers, but then also we get an overview of the whole body. So we can see, how is their liver functioning? How is their immune system functioning? How do they have any possible nutrient deficiencies? How is their thyroid function? And then from that, we can see why these things might be popping up. So I'm really passionate about that. And that's kind of what I've dedicated a lot of my time into understanding better, so that, because the reason why I love it, it gives us this overview of the person as a whole. But then secondly, it's so much more cost effective than if you run all the functional labs there are to get an insight, you're probably going to be looking at $2,000-$3,000. Whereas with a blood test, you can get all this information from $200-$300.
That's incredible. And so once you're at that space and at that place where you have a good sort of baseline indication of the different functional tests, where would you take it from there? Is that when you really become quite customized and say like, well, I'm quite clear that it's sort of, there's a hint in this direction, therefore let's go into this direction? Is that sort of how you would operate from there?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was the next thing with your question before. It's a great follow-up question. That is exactly right. And that's where I think it does require a bit of an individualized approach. There's definitely things that apply to most people. There's definitely, like, I usually say to people, probably like 70 to 80, maybe even 90 of like treatment plans will be relatively similar. Especially because for example, we work mainly with women who are already experiencing gut challenges, who are in that like 25 to 45 range. So like, there's going to be a lot of crossover there, but there's also going to be some individuality and some nuance to it as well. But exactly right, we need to think about the person, how this person's presenting, what's like their hierarchy, what's their order of priorities, what's the timelines as well. So for example, there might be 100 things we could do for you, for example, right? There could be like 50 different supplements you might benefit from. There could be 100 different foods. There could be all these different lifestyle things that you could benefit from doing each day, but that's not realistic. So we need to understand what are the, 3 to 10 things that are going to be the move the needle the most, and then focus on that, then progress from there. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question a little bit, but I think that's where we can really tweak it. And it's not only going to get you better results, but it's going to help save money, because you're not going to try and do every single biohack under the sun and take every supplement under the sun. But then also it's going to save mental load. Like, if you try and do everything that could be beneficial, you are just going to simply get overwhelmed and not do any of them. So you need to make sure you're doing the right things that are going to move the needle.
Yeah. What would be your top five things that you would say, look, everyone would benefit, unless they have like the most amazing gut health already, but like what would be the 5 things that you say, like, look, if I have a magic wand and I do that to everyone on this planet, this would make the biggest difference to their gut health and to public health, I guess?
Well, we have to think about what's going to be the things that apply to all human beings, and what kind of things. So for example, supplements, they have an amazing place, but does every person need a specific supplement? Most likely not. There's only a couple that I can think of there. So things that are constant and things that apply to like the laws of human nature are probably going to make the most sense. So for example, light exposure is always constant. You're either in light or you're in darkness, and this has an impact on the circadian rhythm. And even the gut microbiome has its own circadian rhythm, and the circadian rhythm influences the gut microbiome. So this is going to affect sleep. This is going to affect energy, mood. So I think that just optimizing your light exposure a little bit, and this is another thing in the modern world that's gotten so kind of far away from what we kind of evolved under. We evolved under just like sunlight, darkness, complete darkness at nighttime, fire. Now we have the complete opposite, right? We don't have darkness at night, and we have this bright blue, artificial light during the day.
And we have a torch that we constantly put in front of our,
yeah,
like with
yeah,
blue light,
exactly.
like it's the morning. It's the morning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's number one, because that's always relevant, and that's laws of mammals basically, right? Like applies to all. And then secondly, the other thing that's constant is your thoughts. And so if you can change your thoughts, and we talked about top down before and how the brain's always influenced communicating with the gut. So if we can change, like, if you can have awareness of your thoughts and have a little bit of control over them potentially, or direct them into a more positive framing, then that's going to have a massive impact. So, and again, that has people overlook these things because they're like, oh, light exposure, thoughts, emotions, these things don't impact my gut health because it's not direct, but it actually is. And it's actually potentially the most important. So you got those two. Number three is the way that people eat. So I love this one, like around eating practices, because most people skip this, but funnily enough, it's free. It doesn't take much time and it's easy. And that's literally just like the state that you're in when you eat. So being in a parasympathetic rest and digest state. So many people eating while driving, eating while working, like just trying to get it in and not thinking about how they eat, which I find hilarious if someone's taken a digestive enzyme but then not doing that, because we know that that's what's going to actually help to secrete stomach acid, bile, and digestive enzymes is being in a relaxed state. So that's super important. And then if people are spending like all this time and energy on creating healthy meals and what they're eating, but not how they eat it, well, then they're missing half of the kind of equation there. So I'm a big fan of getting your eating practices right. There's three things right there.
Just on that, I just want to say something because it really hit me the other day. I went to the hairdresser and we talked about younger generation and how they're raised differently than we were and so on. And I was talking about, look, like for me, it's really important to come together as a family for a meal. That's when you exchange information and where you at. You check in with each other. And he was saying, look, out of the 15 families that I know, there's one family that sits down together to eat the meal, which, to your point, like he said, like, I said, what do the rest of the people do? And he said, well, they watch something, or they just know the food is ready and they will get it to their room when they're ready to eat, or just sit somewhere and do something, and if you talk about kids that are older than 10, they have the devices that they get distracted with and so on. So it's certainly something that, I thought it was sad just from a communal point of view, but to your point of digestion, it must have such an impact to not realize that you're even eating, I guess.
100%. And I'd say to people, like, meal times and this is not always possible. For example, like if you have the opportunity, for example, if your whole family is at home at nighttime, then I think it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you might not be able to eat with your family while you're at work, but you should be able to at least eat away from your workspace because you're associating work is sympathetic by nature. Like especially if you're stressed, fast paced with the work that you do, and then you're trying to eat at the desk, like you can't get into a parasympathetic state at your desk. So you need to just move yourself away from it. And that's even that smallest little change is going to help with your digestion. And the funny thing is, like, then if you digest your food better, when you go back to work, you're going to be more productive. And you're not going to have that crash later on. This is going to be better for your blood sugar. It's going to be better for because this sluggishness from after eating is just simply poor digestion. So if you're not breaking your food down properly, then of course you're going to feel brain fogged after eating.
Remind me why it's important that we actually recognize that we're eating. I mean, does our gut not know that anyway? Obviously there's food. So why is it functioning differently if we don't sit down and sort of give it that mindfulness, if you like?
So we eat with our eyes and our nose first, right? So we have to kind of see the food and then smell the food, and this is what we call the cephalic phase of digestion. So this is what happens before you actually consume the food, before it gets into your mouth. And in this time, this is when you actually secrete like a significant amount, potentially more than half of your saliva, and your stomach acid starts to increase so you can break the food down. So the body starts to prepare. And you'll notice this when if you just sit there for literally 5 seconds, look at your food, take a deep breath and smell it, you'll start to produce saliva. And what's really important here is like, it's important to understand the top-down approach and how this simple action of looking at your food and smelling it and releasing saliva then triggers every other function downstream from that. So it's almost like a huge domino effect, the digestive system. And if you skip parts, you try and rush through them, then the next part's not going to function as well. So, and this does come back to the vagus nerve to a degree as well. And I won't get too technical with it, but basically, like, saliva is so important because saliva is what saliva has, like salivary amylase, which helps you to break down carbohydrates, for example. But saliva also contains secretory IgA, which then binds onto like food antigens and prevents the immune system from tagging it as an invader. So sometimes people who don't produce enough saliva, for example, they're actually going to have food sensitivities just from that. It's not to do anything to do with their gut. It's not to do with their leaky gut. It's not their immune system. Well, it is their immune system, but it's because the saliva didn't get the chance to tag it and be like, that's all good, pass through. So, and then like it just goes on from there, right? Like
Wow.
then the act of swallowing is what kind of stimulates the stomach to start to increase stomach acid. And then the acidity of the stomach is then what tells the liver and gallbladder to release bile. So if this doesn't happen, then the next step doesn't happen in the bile. That's antimicrobial in the small intestine, helps with motility through there. So it sits there longer, ferments, and you can see how it just kind of one thing leads to the next.
I think that this is absolutely incredible because I don't believe that many people are aware of just the significance. I think if people are a little bit aware of it, it would be more like, hey, this is easier for the digestion because if you chew well, I guess this is really where the common knowledge starts and stops. Is basically if you chew well, you already pre-digest a little bit, and therefore that's really good for your digestion. But what you basically saying is like part of the whole process is that you actually get ready to eat. And back in the days, like, you know, when we were hunter and gatherers, of course, it would take to prepare probably food, or you would see sort of like the bushes of, I don't know, berries in front of you and you look forward to it and so on. So there is this natural thing happening. And so thinking about the rituals that, for example, we have at home is like everyone starts together. And I visited recently a friend who is French, has a French background, and therefore they have really specific things of how the food is sort of served, and you know what is said, and you know, and check that everyone has everything and so on. And that's more than 5 seconds of like, all right, I'm ready to eat now, so can we start? It actually takes like a few minutes, I would say, in that particular dinner, at least 5 minutes before everyone had their food and they could, you know, say thank you and so on. But what you basically saying is like, this is essential to have a good digestion. If you don't do that, you're already missing an important part of it all, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there's these things pop up in all kinds of different cultures all over the world.
Uh-huh.
So like the Japanese, like they have a similar thing where they sit down and they sit on the ground and they eat in a group. And even like in for example, in Christian religion, like it's saying grace. I believe it's Christian.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm personally religious, but you say grace before your meal. And even this is just it's showing appreciation and gratitude is helping you get into that parasympathetic nervous system as well. So like, and then like on the flip side of that, if people are not only on, like, they might be working, but then they're also on their phone while eating, like this is looking at such a narrow field of view. And we know that looking at a narrow point of vision, a field of view, is going to stimulate more of the sympathetic. So it's more of a stressful focus state. Whereas if you look over a horizon, for example, a wide field of view, then you're going to it helps to stimulate more of a relaxed parasympathetic nervous system. So that's where, for example, I'll sit on my balcony and look out over like a wider field. And even that by itself, there's no effort involved whatsoever, but I know that that's going to help me with digestion to a degree. So all these little things like can help. And I think that, yeah, we're losing so many key things that help with gut health in so many different areas.
Yeah. Well, to give it a positive spin, I guess we get more and more clear that these things that prior to, I guess, us investigating and suffering from it, it was just part of sort of our culture, but the understanding might have been not necessarily there.
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, now being a really rational sort of culture, or, you know, the Western world is very rational. We first need to understand why, and then we do it, versus our culture prescribes that, therefore we just follow it and it's good for us, unfortunately. But you know, that's where we got to.
Exactly. And, I'll keep speaking about this stuff, and I'm glad that it's gotten brought up, because a lot of people focus on all these things like supplements and biohacks because it's the new latest and greatest, but then they do that and they don't pay enough attention to these simple free things that are so natural. And
Yeah.
it comes back to, like, when you're talking about those 5 things, I think we already got through 3, but a fourth one is community.
Yeah.
And if you look at, for example, the blue zones in the world where people are more likely to live past 100, all the diets are different. So people put a lot of emphasis onto the diet part of it. What do they eat? They all eat different diets. But the one thing they have the most in common is their sense of community and purpose. So that, and then how this ties in with like gut health, and because with this community and sense of purpose and these meal times, you're not only having that feeling of community with the people that you're eating with, but then each of these meals is an opportunity to essentially meditate, right? Like it's a ritual that you're having your day to get back into this relaxed parasympathetic nervous system. It breaks up the day. So then that's having that knock-on impact onto your gut health. So then it's crazy. Like, it's just these little things you can do that have such a huge impact.
That's beautiful. That really is. You got a fifth one?
Fifth one. I mean, I would say that movement probably potentially ties into that a little bit as well. And these are, well, I mean, there's many, like, right? Like, maybe even more so than movement, you'd say sleep. So, like, everyone, we need sleep. It's a biological necessity. If we didn't need to sleep, then we would have evolved to not sleep anymore. And I think a lot of people, and I guess that comes back to the circadian health and the light exposure earlier. I think that was number one. But we know that sleep, like poor sleep, short sleep, broken sleep, all of these things will have a negative impact on the gut microbiome, its diversity, and then also the gut lining as well. And then vice versa, though, like we know that if there is inflammation in the gut, if there is damage to the gut lining or the microbiome, then that will influence sleep. Because like I said before, the gut plays such a huge role in neurotransmitters. So a lot of people have heard of the gut to brain connection. Then a lot of people would have heard potentially that about 90+% of serotonin is produced in the gut. Wow. And then we know that serotonin has a huge impact. Like, serotonin gets converted into melatonin, which is kind of like the sleep regulating hormone. So we know that, the gut microbiome plays a big role there. There's other ways too that the gut will influence sleep quality too. So improving the gut, again, this is kind of this double connection, right? Like, if we can improve sleep, then we can improve gut health just by extension of that. But if we can improve gut health, then generally sleep will improve as well.
There's a lot of, I guess, rhythm that I can sort of detect in what you're talking about, and the right timing and so on. Something that has been over the years always fascinating for me, and I started, I think, as a teenager, is experimenting with fasting, and of course they're the fasts that are just natural. While you sleep, you normally don't eat, so there's that type of fast, and then there are long-term fasts as well. But my question specifically would then be, in this rhythm that you describe, where does fasting fit into it, and versus snacking, versus like eat when you're hungry or not, like, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's quite nuanced. But so for example, with snacking's really not great for gut health overall.
Right.
Like, it is definitely going to be better to try and have stable meals. Coming back to the circadian, if we can have meals at consistent times, because meal timing and eating is one of those kind of influencing factors onto the circadian alignment.
Yeah.
So that's where trying to eat but it's not always possible, right? Like,
No.
I understand that people live in this modern world, and you can't eat at 7, 12, 7 every single day.
Right.
But if we can try to do that, that's one thing. But then also this spacing between the meals. So the gut has something called the migrating motor. Well, actually, it's in the brain, but there's a thing in the brain called the migrating motor complex. And this is what essentially triggers the gut to contract. It's called a peristaltic contraction. And what it does, the gut muscles contract, and it moves things through the digestive system. So it moves like bacteria, and it moves like food remnants down and through and out. So this is really important, because if the food's sitting there for too long, then bacteria will be kind of drawn to that, will start to ferment, and that will cause symptoms. For starters, it might cause bloating and gas. But secondly, this is what can lead to bacterial overgrowth in the wrong place. So you can get things like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, when you actually don't want the bacteria in the small intestine, you want it in the large. So that's one example of how that can be influenced. But that only kicks in if, depends on the person. In a really healthy gut, probably around 90 minutes. But for someone who's got more highly stressed or had some past food poisoning or got some issues there, can be up to 4 to 5 hours. So it is good to have try and have this 4 to 5 hour gap in between meals if you can, where you're not consuming calories. So this can kick in more times throughout the day. So this will kick in at overnight for most people. And you're going to get that one contraction there. But if you can get that through the day, that's going to be really beneficial for preventing gut health and reducing your symptoms too.
Right.
So that's one factor for the short-term fasts. Bit of an in-depth answer, but we can go into the other types of fasting as well if you want to.
Oh, I would love
but
to.
I think,
I think because I think also, and that's when people don't have the best relationship with food, and you work with a lot of women, I just assume that there's also that I should not eat more because otherwise I don't have the picture that of myself, or create not the picture of myself that I want to be, that I want to have, and therefore I control the food that is going into my body. And there are many other, I think, reasons why people control their food. Maybe it's the only thing they can control or whatever it is. But I could imagine that also is quite damaging if you don't find sort of like a natural rhythm from that point of view.
Yeah, exactly. And there's usually psychological elements to that, right? So that would be a great example. And that's actually one scenario where I would generally say to people, if they do have some sort of disordered eating, that they're probably going to really need to address that and support that first. I don't personally directly work with people with eating disorders because it's quite limited in what you can do. You need to, work through that, get yourself into a point where you have a good relationship with food first to then be able to address the gut. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, disordered eating can cause gut issues as well. So these people usually do have some some problems in their gut they need to repair, but you've got to address the brain first because there's a lot to that, and it needs to be supported properly. I'm a big believer in that. But what you said as well is it's this level of control, but it's also the way, think about disordered eating in what itself, it's the relationship with food, and think about the mental state that you would be in when you're consuming food. You're consuming food from not a nourishment perspective, but from either a control perspective, a restriction perspective, a self-punishment perspective, a stress perspective. You're doing it out of either boredom or to numb emotions. You can imagine that none of those things are going to be supporting those functions at the top that I said around saliva and stomach acid and bile and things.
Yeah. And what do you make out of people? I belong to that at times. I eat for energy. So if I don't get enough sleep, or I'm really stressed actually, which is probably then a different reason. But if I don't get enough sleep, and sometimes my little ones, help me with that, or I'm just on the phone too long and I don't get a decent sleep because I guess the blue light would mess me up, I would eat mostly, and it would come down to chocolate, muesli bars, or something like that, to actually just get through the day. That's at least how I explain it to myself. But what would that indicate? But also, what does that do to my digestion rhythm and overall health?
Yeah. So when you were speaking, I just want to go to the side for a sec, but sometimes people might listen to this, especially moms or maybe busy professionals. I'm not doing that. I can't do that. It almost causes more stress. And I think it's important to recognize that there's optimal and then there's realistic. And it's also about just controlling what you can control. For example, what you just told me there, some of that stuff might be in your control if you planned around it, but sometimes it's not going to be. You're in the modern world, there's certain things that are not going to be able to be optimized. And I think a lot of people are getting into, I don't know, this is from my personal experience, but with social media and with all this information, it's becoming almost more stressful to try and be healthy. And it's almost over optimizing and then missing out on actually living life. And then this just creates so many more, a cascade. So I think for me, a lot of people are kind of shocked when I say that, I'm not perfect. There's tons of things that I do that you would not consider optimal. But I don't really spend, and I truly value health. It's my top value, and I do everything that I can to control it. But I don't worry too much about my health. I don't spend time thinking, there's only a plastic bottle of water here. And I think about like, why am I going to get microplastics? Or I wouldn't be on a call in the evening and worry like, oh, I've messed up my circadian rhythm. Like that's just out of my control, right? So I hope if anyone's listening, then they kind of can, understand that and take that away, because I think we're on a slippery slope from a health perspective and just generally for people.
Be kind to yourself, hey?
Yeah, 100%. People are so harsh on themselves, and they're worrying a lot about their health, it's great to value your health and to prioritize it and to take action on it. Definitely don't let it paralyze you, but it's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent.
Yeah.
So that was a massive side tangent from your question.
So yeah, right. So, but if I go down the route of like, look, I just need well, I won't say a sugar high, but I need something that really gives me that energy from a digestion point of view. That might be, and from a timing point of view, that might be before I even have had breakfast, or it might be, after I had already lunch, and still I was like, okay, no, I need this this sweet muesli bar, let's say, for argument's sake. Like, I do know, and I feel in my body, this is definitely not ideal because I just ate a meal or whatever, but I do it anyway. I guess for me, it would be even interesting to see, like, does it actually really help, or is it just a psychological thing? And at the end of the day, the body doesn't have more energy.
That's exactly it. That's what I would first off say. It's like just one moment of pause. And this is where like the habit of taking a breath before you eat. So then actually, if you struggle with things like this, for example, and then just make a decision around like a conscious decision as to like, what do I want to consume this? Like, is there like just looking at the thought process around it rather than just falling victim to habit and then not being conscious. And that's where obviously things like meditation and mindfulness is so helpful, to have awareness around it. And you're not going to be perfect, but then even if you did have it, you learn from it too. Like, oh, I had the muesli bar. I felt bad from it. Like maybe I'll know that for next time. So you actually take a lesson from it at the same time.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say here is like, I don't necessarily think that the muesli bar itself is good or bad. It's kind of the way that it's the relationship that you have with it. It's like the decision that you had and the emotion that you felt from that food. I think, there's obviously foods that are better and worse, for example. And there's definitely, like a lot of people say, there's no bad foods. There's just like more nutrient dense, less nutrient dense. I think there are detrimental foods in the modern world too, especially the gut. And there's things that will, support that more. But what's more important is the relationship that you have with the food that you consume.
Yeah. Do you have sort of like a top 5, top 10 list of foods that you say, look, there's no doubt this is definitely really not good for you?
Well, that's a great question. I would say that I could probably think of 10 things that probably aren't optimal, but there's also so much nuance to these things as well.
And I mean, like the context is basically, look, there's probably not bad and right food if you do many other things wrong. At least that's my observation. I remember my gran, who she died, was 93, and she wasn't like into health per se. She was into more traditional eating, but she had her chocolate pudding every night, and there were certain sweets that she was doing, but like her overall attitude towards life and the amount she ate, which was a little, made her a really vibrant being most of the time. So I get it. It's not the food itself. It's the context you eat it with, what else you do, and so on. But like if you just say like, with a tendency, most likely it's not good to eat X, Y, and Z to make it not like black and white. I get it's not black and white.
Yeah, 100%. You're spot on. Like my nana, she lived to 104, and like she would, it was crazy. And to 100 and 102, probably she was sharper than me. Like she would, so her brain was functioning well. Physically, she was really good. But yeah, after 104 years, like you've had a pretty good innings.
Yeah.
But on saying that, like, her diet was fine, like pretty similar to what you were saying. Yeah. Like it, traditional, cook their own food but it's not like they're trying to consume sea moss and all these fancy like superfoods. And she definitely didn't take any supplements. So, and obviously maybe, who knows, right? Like I just think like what it came down to was simply her connection, her community, her purpose, her vibrance, her, passion for life. And this is what we see in all these blue zones.
Blue zone stuff, exactly,
But yeah, if we look into like, what kind of research is more telling us about, gut health specifically. And these are things that we didn't really know. And these are usually things that weren't really, like, these have become part of the modern diet. They weren't previously. So we didn't even need to worry about them. So this is where you got to be a bit more conscious around the food that you consume nowadays, because there has been so many changes to the food supply in so many ways. Like I think we can confidently say that ultra processed foods are going to be detrimental, right, to every aspect of your health. We know that even consuming ultra processed foods like standard Australian, standard American diet, that increases endotoxins in the bloodstream. And that's because it increases intestinal permeability. So like it directly causes leaky gut in a very short amount of time, quite significantly. But we've got things like, and all of these things you could probably debate, right? So I'm not saying definitively these are bad, but like there is some evidence to suggest that things like artificial sweeteners like sucralose and the sulfame potassium, ACE-K, these things might disrupt the gut microbiome. And I just don't think that they make a lot of rational sense to consume deliberately. So like I wouldn't be going out of my way to consume these things, right? If there's an alternative. I'm not going to, again, I wouldn't lose sleep. Like you could give me a Coke Zero right now. I'm not going to lose sleep over drinking it. Like I don't stress about my health to that extent, but I know that these things are not optimal. And that's what I say to people a lot of the time. Like I know, for example, that gluten and like the gliadin within gluten, for example, is probably not healthy. So I understand it enough to know that it's not good for me, so I choose not to consume it. But I also understand it well enough to know that it's not going to kill me, and I'm not going to lose sleep over it.
Yeah.
So, for example, gliadin, which is in high amounts within like genetically modified kind of Australian American wheat, like this potentially might increase intestinal permeability. So, again, I'm not trying to demonize gluten. I'm just trying to in the research that does increase that to an extent. Then we have like things that kind of added to foods, like for example, pesticides and herbicides. These things, potentially affected. Yeah, exactly. So you can see that I'm taking quite a political kind of standpoint towards it. Like I'm not trying to demonize these foods. Even for example, I'll recognize seed oils. Like these are one that are very kind of, I guess, demonized online.
Yeah.
And like, I think the term seed oils is obviously misleading. So that's why some people get upset when you say seed oils are bad. Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that. But when we have like high omega-6 oxidized polyunsaturated fatty acids in oils, then that are sitting on the shelf for a long period of time that are usually found in ultra-processed foods, then it actually becomes good advice to avoid seed oils, because that's like a simplification, right? It's like, that's why. So like, again, you can't say that on social media because people can be like, tune out. What does that mean? So while I don't think that seed oils are necessarily the devil, I do think that avoiding seed oils actually becomes good standard health advice for most people, because it means that they're not going to be consuming these ultra-processed foods. So
a roundabout way to do that.
You know what I mean? The one thing that I just thought of that is definitively detrimental for gut health, and don't make friends with saying this, but it's alcohol. We know that.
There was one thing on the list I wanted to talk to you. We both in Australia, alcohol is certainly part of the culture, and many other Western cultures, of course. So I would love you to dive into that a little bit if you could.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll preface this by saying that I still drink alcohol every now and then. Like I don't drink it often because I understand it well enough to know that it's not helping me, and it just doesn't support the goals that I want to achieve in life. It doesn't support the way that I want to feel. So I love that the culture is actually shifting a little bit in Australia. There's a lot more opportunity and a lot of people are choosing not to drink alcohol more nowadays. Whereas I know when I was a kid, like from, I'd probably say 16 to like 25, this was like binge drinking pretty much every weekend, 10, 20 drinks at least.
And Charley, so like, if you think about it, there's something that I found, it's probably the health might be part of it, why people don't drink as much. But I mean, I have endless stories about how people messed up their life, their relationships, not only their lover relationships, but also with friends and so on, because alcohol was consumed in such amount that things were said that shouldn't have been said, or things were done. I mean, I know people who died because of it and so on. It's certainly something that people slowly get that, and like all forced to sort of social media that also from that angle was really, really helpful to actually point out it's like this is happening because of alcohol or because of misusing it. Yeah,
exactly. And that's the misuse. Like, again, I don't think these blue zones are like the holy grail of healthy
No.
lifestyle
Yeah.
or use science or anything like that. But it's more like a lot of these people in blue zones also consume alcohol. It's the relationship with it, and it's the misuse, right? Like the culture in Australia was not about, having one glass of organic red wine with your family. It was going out and staying up till 4 a.m. and drinking, 20 standard drinks and combining that with drugs and doing that every weekend. And that's the friendship group that you have. And obviously, we don't want to, there's benefits in that way. Like you can actually use alcohol in beneficial ways through social connection if it helps to kind of lubricate that and facilitate that. But again, we're just talking about alcohol, the molecule itself. And we know that, look, obviously alcohol's antimicrobial. It's, rubbing alcohol kills bacteria. So it has the same impact on the gut. It reduces beneficial bacteria and increases pathogenic bacteria. So it induces dysbiosis in the gut. It also increases that permeability of the gut lining as well. So it actually reduces the function of the cells, they're called intestinal stem cells, that regenerate the gut. So the gut actually regenerates itself constantly, but certain factors can knock out or damage the cells that help that to happen. So it's kind of like an alcohol is one of those things that does that. So the gut can't heal itself as well. But then there's all these other knock-on effects too, right? Like, for example, if you have imbalances within the gut, like these bacteria, if you have pathogenic or bad bacteria in the gut, then these will release their own toxins, right? So they release things called endotoxins. And one of these is acetaldehyde, which is what alcohol gets broken down into. And the other one is lipopolysaccharide. Both of these things are quite inflammatory. Then you've got damage to the gut lining at the same time. These toxins aren't excreted through the digestive system because the gut lining is kind of like a barrier to the bloodstream. They get into the bloodstream and they can cause this systemic inflammation. So they're getting to all the kind of the areas of the body and particularly the brain and increasing the damage there. So we've got nutrient deficiencies that alcohol causes as well. Obviously, it causes damage to like all the major organs directly. So it's the dose is in the devil's always in the dose. But with alcohol, it's a tricky one because there is no healthy amount, right? It's not like one drink is better, healthy. It's one drink is not as bad and more drinks is worse.
Yeah.
And obviously none is better than any, but also there's nuance to that too, right? Because we're living in a modern world, like it's part of the culture. It's not to say never drink again. I still drink every now and then, but I think it's just having awareness there. And again, what we come back with the food, same with the alcohol, making a conscious decision. Don't just be coming home from work every day. The habit is just to crack a beer or to have a wine to unwind. Or if your whole friendship circle is dependent on drinking together, then that's going to potentially have some knock-on effects in the future. So it compounds.
Yeah. Good point. Any particular, and then we move on, but is there any particular alcohol that is better than other? Is it like more like the wine over the beer, or the what else exists? I guess, like you already said, like ethanol is not great for anything because it kills it. So I guess low alcohol is better from that point of view. Could you say that?
Well, yeah, like I said, like no alcohol is better than any. However, there are definitely better alcohols. There's definitely a hierarchy when it comes to like if you're gonna drink, you should drink this, for example. So I would probably classify things like beer and white wine at kind of the bottom of the list because beer usually has some sort of mycotoxin, so it can have mold in it. Then also it's made from wheat, and barley. So a lot of the time, if it's not organic, like you're going to be exposed to things like pesticides, like herbicides. Glyphosate's a herbicide. You got to get that right. People get annoyed. And then also gluten, right? Like if you're sensitive to gluten, like you're consuming quite a high amount of gluten, and then also calories within beer too. If like, for example, weight loss is a goal, like beer is probably going to be not ideal. It potentially has knock-on effects to things like hormones too. Beer gut, for example, potentially linked to like things like high estrogen. And then white wine, obviously similar things, doesn't have the gluten, but does have the sugar, does have the calories, and doesn't have any of the nutrients. So then that's where kind of things like red wine potentially could be better. Depends on the person. Like there's nuance to this, like histamine and things like that. But a good organic, like sulfite-free, biodynamic kind of red wine can be really good not good, but better in small amounts. And what's really interesting is Sardinia, which I've actually been to. It's an island off Italy.
Yeah.
You know it?
Yeah. I have some friends from that area. There are actually a couple of smaller islands that I know people from. But Is that a blue zone? Probably, right?
It is, yeah. Small little villages in the center of Sardinia are blue zones, like not the whole island. But I've went to the blue zone. It was like one of on my bucket list, and it's crazy how isolated it is. Like we didn't see a pharmacy in the village, which is funny because there's a lot of old people there. But it takes 2 hours to 3 hours through these winding mountain roads to get there. It's super isolated. So that generally leads to like the genetics is part of it in Sardinia. It's quite a isolated set of genetics that allow them to live longer, but it's also a lifestyle. But anyway, in Sardinia, they drink reasonable amount of red wine, but that red wine is actually much higher in antioxidants and polyphenols. So like resveratrol, it's about 3 times higher than typical red wine.
Gee.
So you can get some benefits from that. 1 or 2 glasses of that probably might actually have some benefits potentially.
Yeah.
And then like I would say, like clear spirits as well. So things like, gin and vodka, good quality gin or vodka that's more diluted. So then it also comes down to the mixer. Yeah. So if you're mixing it with like, for example, vodka raspberry or, gin and tonic, like these are pretty high in sugar. There's no benefits. But like if I was to drink one of them, I would combine it with like a mineral water, like a San Pellegrino, for example. Then you're going to get some minerals in the water to kind of get a little bit hydrated and then just dilute it more. Like obviously if you're doing shots, it's going to be a lot more potent compared to like a diluted drink, which is going to have a negative impact on like the cells of the gut and the microbiome.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Thought so. Something that I might have not asked you properly is like, are there some sort of golden times where someone who gets up, let's just make something up, gets up at 6, gets to bed at 10? Like when would we start to eat? When would we stop to eat? Again, I'm sure it's probably nuanced depending on the person, but like, is there an overall guidance of what you see is beneficial for gut health?
So, yeah, I think there's probably no golden rules because, yeah, like you said, and a lot of the time people don't have a huge amount of control over this. Like we're probably lucky in the way that, obviously if you have a particular job, I've got a lot of clients who work shift work, for example, like they can't choose when they wake up and go to bed. So it's almost irrelevant, right? It's one of those things, control what you can control, don't stress over what you can't.
Yeah.
But I think if we can optimize, we want to be kind of rising around when the sun rises and then going to bed like a couple of hours after. Generally, that's pretty circadian aligned. And then having a couple of hours, like, if on an amazing day, like I'll probably have dinner like while watching the sunset, you know what I mean? Like nice and relatively early, still under natural light. And then I've got a few hours before bed where I'm kind of digesting my food, which is more not massively to do with gut health. There's more to do with just obviously sleep quality and melatonin production. So I would say like general rule is to try and, I do find that most people would benefit from eating like earlier in the morning, like eating breakfast generally, going to digest it better, kind of helps to balance blood sugar, kind of set the circadian rhythm as well. A lot of people skip breakfast, which then kind of causes a bit of a knock-on effect.
Yeah.
Especially more for women. It's probably a bit more problematic than for men, but again, like it just depends.
Yeah.
But yeah, trying to eat at consistent times each day, trying to eat, within sunlight hours, I think they're probably the biggest things, and trying to have like a few hours, like 3 to 5 hours in between your meals rather than snacking. That would probably be my standard, like good starting point recommendation.
Yeah. Do you have an opinion on things like colonics and, enema, which is something I always throw in there when I would talk to people who, who are sort of like in their 90s, their 80s and 90s, they would say, look, in the 1920s, 1930s and so on, the first thing that a doctor would ask before they even would come and visit you would be, have you tried an enema? Which I thought was fascinating. Back in the days, it was so common, certainly like in the parts of Europe that I grew up, to do that before trying anything else. And to your point of how important gut health is, it certainly points towards that. But do you have you looked into that much?
Yeah, a little bit. I think a little bit lacking on the research around it. So I think it's not really like clear cut just yet. I think but we can kind of what we can probably assume is, I think it's super important to have that's almost one of the first things you do need to support when it comes to supporting your gut health, is to get clearance, to get like regular bowel movements, to move these kind of, because otherwise it's going to recirculate. This is how we kind of remove waste, right?
Yeah.
So I think that for some people, an enema or a colonic can be quite helpful to start this off, because what we want to think about is we want to fix this underlying problem. So I don't think that colonics and enemas are going to be like a root cause approach. They can be helpful symptomatically, and you can feel better from them, and they kind of manual support there. But why? Like, why are you having this like, why are you struggling to have bowel movements? Why are you not clearing things out properly? And that's usually a gut health problem. But what's funny here is like, to be able to fix this like bacterial imbalance, or to fix this overgrowth, whatever it might be, then we need to have things moving. But we can't fix this until things are moving. So like, we do the colonic at the start, short term, to support that movement, that clearance, that detoxification, and then go deeper and try and actually fix the gut as a whole, so we're not dependent on these colonics or enemas anymore, and then we don't need to utilize them as often. So it's possible that they might have a negative impact on the gut microbiome, like over time, if you're constantly doing them.
Yeah.
But that's not definitive either.
Yeah.
But I think, it's more about the fact that like, if you're having to do these all the time, like I've had clients who had to do enemas daily. So if you're having to, and you have to, you're dependent on it, that's a really bad sign. And you want to kind of use them as a tool. It's kind of like a restrictive diet. Like, you use it as a tool to get you to where you need to be, and then you bring the food back in. Restrictive diet isn't a solution, like long-term, to just not eat these certain foods ever again.
Yeah.
It's telling you that you've got a problem that you want to address the problem, then bring the foods back in, or then reduce the enemas, colonics. It's, I don't want to overuse the word, but kind of like, root cause approach almost.
Well, it makes sense, right? Rather than sort of creating a crutch there.
So like, root cause approach is, it's about, a lot of time it's not about getting to the root cause. It's about getting to, like, fixing the symptoms first.
Yeah.
It's about like, get you from feeling horrible to feeling normal, and then we can then think about why that is and the root cause. So it's kind of like, support the foundations first, the shaky house, get it steady, and then we can kind of, flush it out. We can, take out the old furniture, put in the new stuff, get it all shiny and nice to live in.
Gotcha. Which brings me actually to antibiotics. It's something that just came to mind because as far as I know, that's a really common thing that people use. I remember when I got into sort of the health topic about sort of 20 years ago, it was one of the first things that I thought, like, wow, that's really the devil when it comes to gut health. And, what do you do about that? What's your take on that? And how would you sort of buffer the strong effects of, the obviously antibiotic?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, like, it blows my mind, like, first off, how much we use them. So the amount of times that, and again, I'm not against antibiotics, and I've used antibiotics many times in my life, and certain scenarios, they have, especially more of the more recent times, extremely helpful. But my thinking around antibiotics is, first off, is my life in danger? So if not, okay, is there a chance of potential permanent injury? So for example, you have an infection, and if you don't address this infection, you're going to lose your arm. Well, then you should use the antibiotics. If you're going to die, you should use the antibiotics with likelihood. Or have I already exhausted, the other alternatives first before I use the antibiotics? Like, there's no other kind of option for example, I had a staph infection. I tried everything that I could to, address the staph infection. And I couldn't get rid of it for like 4 months, and then the antibiotics got rid of it straight away. Wow. So like, there's a time and a place for sure. But a lot of the time, for example, one of the huge actual triggers of my own health problems was being prescribed antibiotics for glandular fever, which is a virus, which first off wouldn't have any impact.
Yeah.
But then secondly, I had an allergic reaction to the antibiotics, and then that kind of triggered a whole kind of cascade of things. So we need to ask the question first, like, do we need the antibiotic? First off, like, when I had the staph infection, I wanted to get that bacteria checked to see if it was, first off, antibiotic resistant, what type of bacteria it was, to then be able to treat that effectively rather than use waste, like just guess, right? Yeah. So a lot of the time we're using antibiotics for the wrong things at the wrong times too often. They're being overused, and then they're not used correctly. Like, if you are going to use antibiotics, finish the course, because antibiotic resistance is a huge threat to basically human life as a whole, right? Like, if we get all these antibiotic resistant strains of bacteria, we're in big trouble. So so there's nuance, right? I'm not against antibiotics, but make sure that you're doing it in the right way. You take the right approach towards it. And then if you want to offset and this is the next thing, right? Like, so first off, doctors will prescribe the antibiotic like bit willy-nilly, which I think we need to take that more seriously. But then secondly, why wouldn't we educate the amount of people who have had their mind blown by like what you can do to kind of reduce the damage that the antibiotics might cause or even increase the efficacy is it's never educated around like, okay, if you're going to take this antibiotic, you should also take Saccharomyces boulardii, which is another type of probiotic that's antibiotic resistant, which has been shown to reduce the negative impacts of antibiotics on the gut microbiome. So if anyone's listening, you always want to have that Saccharomyces boulardii. When you go pick up the script for the antibiotics, you can get it from the chemist, and it's very good, cheap, effective probiotic that you can take at the same time.
At the same time. Okay. So not afterwards.
Yeah, so
right away.
because the interesting thing about Saccharomyces boulardii is it's actually a yeast. So most probiotics are bacteria and antibiotics would kill them. But Saccharomyces boulardii is a type of yeast, and yeast is antibiotic resistant. So it's not influenced. Antibiotics only kill off bacteria. So and then there are other strains of probiotics as well that have been studied to take like either away from the antibiotic or after. So that would be things like Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, Bifidobacterium adelentis BB12, I think it's called. So there's a couple of strains you can also add in if you want to go more so. And then things like lactoferrin. Lactoferrin helps to offset the damage that's caused by antibiotics, and then also help with the kind of inoculation of the microbiome from the probiotics. So there's a few things you can do there. And then post antibiotics, super important to just support the microbiome like in its recovery, because a lot of people don't realize that, research has shown anywhere from 3 months to 4 years it can take for the microbiome to get back, if ever. Sometimes some strains are actually permanently wiped out from antibiotics.
Wow.
But it takes a long time. So but you can speed that up by taking things like prebiotics, post antibiotics, to boost up these beneficial bacteria and give them the food they need to thrive. And you can even do this through just having a more diverse diet. So like, for example, if you take antibiotics, don't, after you stop, then start eating ultra processed foods, consuming a heap of sugar, alcohol, and eating the same things every day, because you're not setting your microbiome up to recover as well as it could. So hopefully that helps some people.
Yeah, that was really insightful. Reminded me on what you said earlier, that certain things are actually created in the, did you say created by the gut? So it's not that we have to seed everything new once it gets wiped out or boosted just because we don't have enough. There's also the production within the gut of certain biome.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think what you're saying is there's a kind of a natural microbiome, right?
Yeah.
So with antibiotics, for example, the goal is to it's like an atomic bomb, basically.
Wow.
It's just going to wipe out everything.
Yeah.
But and unfortunately, good bacteria a lot of the time are actually a little bit more sensitive than the bad. It's always the way. Like the bad guy's always got more. The bad guy's always got more superpowers than the good guy, but somehow the good guy does win in the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got to support them. So by feeding them, there's still going to be some there, and then you feed them with the prebiotics so that they can proliferate more, rather than just letting. Basically, the way I look at it is like, if you don't support the good guys, you don't give them a helping hand, then the bad guys are just going to be like, well, cool, let's just go again. Like, we're still here. So it's an ecosystem as a whole, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does. And when it comes to sort of more natural supplements, I used to follow Donna Gates's. She did a particular type of diet. It comes to me, but it had a lot to do with sort of sauerkraut and I guess fermented all sorts. What sort of magnitude do you see these things play? Because I know some people swear by it, said that's it, and I have to eat at least one mouthful of sauerkraut with every meal, otherwise my gut will not be able to digest it. Even though, so quite extreme statements there as well.
Yeah. So I'm all for them. I think that they are great. I think that the research is solid. I think that, they're for sure beneficial. However, if we come back to what I was talking about earlier with the top-down method, we have to think about this order, and probiotics and obviously fermented foods, probiotic rich foods, these are basically having that direct impact on the microbiome. But the way
Yeah.
I look at that as the bottom of that hierarchy, it's almost like a waterfall, and like if like the top of the waterfall is going to influence everything downstream, but at the bottom of the waterfall, that's just the bottom of the waterfall. The top's still going to be the same, no matter what. So the microbiome and probiotics, they're at the bottom. They're the bottom of the waterfall. They're the end of the digestive system. So first off, before we go into fermented foods and probiotics, we want to think about, all right, let's get the oral health first, right? Let's get like the eating practices right. Let's get the mind right. Then let's get the stomach acid right, because probiotics not going to help there. Then let's get like liver and bile flow right. Probiotics not going to help there. Then let's get small intestine right. So like that's where you might have the leaky gut, or that's where you might have that overgrowth. Let's fix that up. Probiotics not going to help a huge deal, and that's actually where probiotics might actually make that worse if you have an overgrowth there, because it's going to increase your symptoms. We need to address that first, and then we can bring in so this is like kind of when we're mapping our treatment plan, like the fermented foods and the probiotics are usually far down the list. Like they're usually later on in someone's journey once they've supported all these other things, because it's just not a highest priority, and it's actually a bit of a wild card, like whether or not it'll actually help them or make them worse.
Thank you. While you mention oral health, do you have some basics to suggest? We jumped onto something that's it's the total mouse care system. It's an American approach, and it's actually it has certain, a particular toothpaste. You have a pre-rinse, you have a post-rinse. I can't quite remember who the dentist is, but I found it really helped. Our teeth actually. What it is basically tries to get the bacteria to more the good bacteria in your mouth first. And I remember in our family we had, some black teeth for a couple of months. It sort of grew because it was a die of more the bad bacteria, and you get that cleaned, and then now it's not there anymore. Plus, you also use xylitol for after each meal, so you have a little xylitol minty that also helps to change how the pH sort of changes quickly to a more supportive one. And it's fascinating what it did to us. So I can certainly hear you there, but I didn't know that that's also related to the gut health.
Yes, definitely big time, especially because like the mouth and so you do have, I touched on this before, like you've got an oral microbiome, so you have a colony of bacteria within the mouth too. And a lot of the time, what we see with people who are like highly stressed with low stomach acid, they actually have a lot of these bacteria in their mouth that should be in the mouth, like Streptococcus strains, in the gut where they probably shouldn't be. And that's because like stomach acid acts as a natural defense from pathogens. So like if you're constantly inoculating your gut with your oral microbiome, and the stomach is kind of the barrier, like the wall there, and it's like the security guard. But if it's not functioning properly, then you might over inoculate your gut with that. So it is really important to consider oral health. I think I'm not a biological dentist. Sometimes people do need, actual dental support here if there's some significant issues. We know that things like H. pylori, for example, which can cause some it's a pathogenic it's a potentially negative bacteria that can reside in the stomach. That can be reside in the oral microbiome too, and in the what are they called, in the mouth, basically, I forget the name of it.
It comes to you. It will come.
But anyway, like it can then get in, so that can be passed on through saliva, so like through obviously kissing or even through sharing drinks. So you got to kind of treat your partner. So it's again, what can help there is, because a lot of these bacteria can have biofilms too. So like flossing, or even I use a water flosser because I hate manual flossing. That can help to break down biofilms like manually, which is pretty cool. Oil pulling is a definite like.
Which oil are you using?
I like to just use coconut or MCT. I'll usually also, I don't do this every day. Like when I was doing a specific gut health protocol, I was doing it as often as I could. But now I kind of do it maybe once or twice a week just for maintenance. But ginger oil in that as well has got a lot of benefits around the oral microbiome, antimicrobial properties, anti-inflammatory. So that oil pulling with a bit of ginger, a bit of peppermint, maybe if you want to get the minty taste too, that's super helpful. The xylitol mints are really good because that can basically act as like a trick food source for like Streptococcus mutans, which is like a pathogenic bacteria in the mouth. So it helps to kind of keep that in check, which is cool. But yeah, trying to go for the mints rather than the gums, because the gums can have like plastics and stuff like that in them. So that's awesome there. And then nasal breathing as well. So like trying to breathe more through the nose and not through the mouth. That's a huge one.
So my children, one of my children is a mouth breather, and I had someone else on our podcast a while ago, and he was talking about particular straps sort of that you could put on the mouth. So all my kids are really into sort of these little. They have a little hole in the middle, so it's not the strap that closes, but it looks and the face is drawn off it on it as well. So it looks pretty funny to have sort of like this moving face. But the thing is, and that was to that person's point, is like when you address that early, meaning when they are still children, it takes way less effort to get that that habit in versus when you're older. And no, it's certainly I know people who would say that that their mouth breathers, normally there's also a dental health problem there as well, because they're not meant to be, like, teeth are not meant to be dry, right?
Yeah, I always say that orthodontists just don't want that to be common knowledge, like, because it's going to put them out of business. Like, I wish that I have known this about how basically nasal breathing causes like the expansion of the palate, which then causes you to have straighter teeth. I had braces for 4 years. Like, I have extreme underbite, so I would have saved a lot of discomfort. I would have saved mum a lot of money. I would have had, obviously, like, that's a big part of like what creates like jaw development and facial structure development, which is kind of associated with like being perceived as more attractive. So yeah, and then obviously the health benefits of it too. Like, you're able to then breathe through the nose better, and that's helping with like nitric oxide production, better sleep quality, better parasympathetic nervous system activation as well. So it's such a massive one, but you got to get onto it early, because after about 25, like, facial structure is pretty much like fully developed. So the earlier you do it, then, or you get kids to do it usually, then the more you can set them up in the long run. And
Thanks. That's really, really helpful.
Yeah. And then obviously, like I said, like, it does influence the oral microbiome too. I believe it is to do with the pH. I'm not 100% confident on that, but it's affecting like the oral microbiome, because through the mouth breathing, obviously it's more of a sympathetic state, so that could be a factor too. But I think the actual breathing through the mouth in some way has an impact on the oral microbiome too. So it's win-win.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, thanks for that.
And one last thing on the oral health too is try to swap your toothbrush every couple of weeks as well. Because if you do have these kind of like candida or H. pylori or parasites in the mouth, in the oral microbiome, which is not necessarily a bad thing, it could be normal, but like, you're trying to fix this, and then you're basically re-inoculating your mouth every day with it, because it's living on the toothbrush head. So just trying to swap that out a little bit more frequently can be helpful as well.
Thanks. What we do is we have two toothbrushes, so that they have 24 hours basically. So we use one at the morning, one at night, so that they dry out. But then recently I visited a friend, and what they do is there are now these little contraptions where you have blue light, so that kills certain bacteria. And a little fan going as well. It's like, this is quite high
toothbrush living lux.
There you go. I mean, what is true, and I'm sure people know that, but if you do live in an area where there are cockroaches, they do love the toothbrush. So it's actually quite nice to have them somehow protected from that. Anyway, yep, not so yum.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, I want to tie this back to how you started, which was, you look at, of course, improving people's health, and especially women who deal with sort of like gut problems, but you also understand performance really well, right? So when you look at gut health and performance, meaning like output of really brainy works, really success in that area, but also sort of using your body to achieve whatever your goals there are, how's there an obvious connection? I can make some up, but I would love to hear what you have to say, is like why this is so important for our performance actually.
Yeah, that's such an overlooked aspect. Like, I think that most people are missing that. Like, most people who are interested in gut health are not doing it from an optimization perspective. They're doing it from a get out of pain perspective. Like, I got these problems and trying to fix them. Right. So again, that's what I was saying to people. Like, if you work on your gut health when you're in an okay state, not only can you prevent these from manifesting, but you can actually optimize yourself past the point that you thought was possible. And that was a huge thing for me. That was, like I said at the start, I didn't actually know that I had gut health problems. And one of the other symptoms I just thought of when you were speaking was just this terrible DOMS. Like I would get DOMS from the gym, like the soreness would last 5, 6, 7 days. And like obviously part of that was to do with a lot of factors, but gut health can actually contribute to that as well, because certain bacteria can actually produce like exercise-based byproducts, basically. So things like calcium ions, hydrogen ions, lactate, and they also help to break it down too. So it's twofold. So then you have this extra soreness. These are things that naturally occur when you're exercising, but then they're exacerbated by your training or by your gut health, sorry. And then again, like nutrient absorption as well is a huge, like it's an obvious one that people can understand. If you're not, able to digest the food that you're trying to eat for performance, then you're going to struggle a little bit there. So supporting digestion to help with that, reducing obviously overall inflammation. Like I said before, any of these, when you eat, if any of these toxins are getting or byproducts are getting out into the bloodstream, that's causing inflammation, which is then causing like poor brain function or brain fog, but also making recovery harder from training. So even hormonal standpoint as well, especially for like men around testosterone, like we know that LPS, which is produced by these bacteria within the gut, if you have an overgrowth of these bad bacteria, then that can actually cause damage within like the Leydig cells, which are in the testicles, which help to produce testosterone. So even low testosterone can have a link to gut health as well. So, and we know testosterone is not only really helpful for exercise performance, and we're in a low testosterone kind of epidemic, but testosterone also helps with motivation. It helps with concentration, desire to achieve goals. So then that's obviously a big factor for performance too. There's probably tons. Obviously sleep's performance, gut health's affected by sleep. I'm not sure, but if that helps to give some clarity, I can maybe give more specifics if you want
definitely. You were saying that you dealt with depression and low motivation sort of 5, 6, 7 years ago. How do we tie that back to gut health? Like, what's the main thing there? Is it the serotonin production that you were talking earlier about, and the lack of good sleep in that?
Yeah, there's a few factors. So I think the neurotransmitters definitely has a big role there. So it's not only serotonin that gets produced by gut microbiome, it's also dopamine. So about 50% of dopamine is potentially produced by the gut microbiome. So dopamine, dopamine is just as correlated with depression as, well, maybe not as much so, but we really focus a lot on serotonin because of selective serotonin reuptake, SSRIs. Which is a medication for depression, which is what I was actually taking. But dopamine, if you think about it, it's going to have just as much of an impact on depression and mood too, because it helps with, it's what is associated with motivation and drive. And obviously that's, if you're not motivated to do things, you feel depressed. So there's about 30 more neurotransmitters as well that are produced or linked to the gut microbiome too. So the gut produces all these different, neurochemicals essentially. And that's going to influence how you think. And we know that, like, even when they've done fecal transplants of things like mice, so they basically inject the microbiome, let's just say, of a rat into another rat, like it changes their personality. They start to exhibit more like either less depressed, or they exhibit more depression or more pro-social behavior. So it changes their behavior directly. And we see this a lot with clients. A lot of the time with clients, like they notice they start like, oh, I'm not actually as highly strung as what I thought I was, or I wasn't just naturally depressed. Like I just, I was just unhealthy. So mentally was one of the biggest things that I saw a change of with my gut health when I started to work on it too. Was just kind of like that fog was basically lifted. And a big part of that too is the inflammation. So when I've touched on this a couple of times, when you've got that leaky gut, that intestinal permeability, then the bacterial byproducts get into the bloodstream and then they cause this total body inflammation, but then they can also get into the brain. And there's a whole theory around neuroinflammation, brain inflammation being a root cause driver of depression as well. So I think there's a couple of really clear examples around how it ties into depression. And then obviously, they're probably the big key ones. There's nutrient absorption too, which plays a role too. But they're the two big rocks, I think.
Now it comes to me. Donna Gates did something that was called body ecology diet. That's right. And
Body culture.
body ecology diet. Yeah, it was a big thing back in the 2010-ish, sort of around that time. It was all about that and candida overgrowth and that type of thing. I haven't looked into candida for such a long time, but back then it was the devil. It was like the thing that would happen, and and to your point of affecting the brain, it was like actually that candida, that is a good thing when it stays in the right place, but if it goes into your
Yes.
body everywhere, it actually runs the show. And I often had this picture in my mind that basically all these little biome parts, basically how they are organized depend on how I act. So even though I'm
Yeah.
sort of like superior because I'm a human versus like a little biome, like a little bacteria or something like that, the sum of them, and there are so many of them, I'm sure, what is a trillion, whatever, like a high number, they actually run the show after all. So when you come to candida, do you mind quickly sort of talking about that a little bit, because it used to be an absolute buzzword. I don't know if it's still as much of a topic than it used to be.
Yeah, I think candida is another one that can really wreak havoc, especially on mental health and especially around anxiety for sure. So, but both, I think, so the difference between candida, like you said, candida is actually part of the microbiome. It's
Right.
normal to have a small amount of candida.
Yeah.
Candida is opportunistic though. So what that means is that it waits essentially for an opportunity to then proliferate and to overtake essentially. So that's a huge problem with antibiotics, is you're wiping out these beneficial bacteria, and then candida can't, as it's a yeast, what I was talking about before, so it can't be affected by antibiotics. So it
Okay.
just sits back while you wipe out everything else, and then it's like, oh cool, well there's all these open spaces, right? There's no one here to tell me I can't take over now, and you can get a candida overgrowth post antibiotics. That's why it's even more important to support your gut post antibiotics and take that Saccharomyces boulardii during antibiotics. But the difference between candida being a yeast and bacterial overgrowths is that it produces different endotoxins. So bacteria produce lipopolysaccharide primarily because that's what makes up their outer layer, and that can be quite inflammatory. But then you've got candida produces things like acetaldehyde, like I said, and salsolinol, I believe is the pronunciation of it. And acetaldehyde is the byproduct, the breakdown of ethanol. So when you consume alcohol, so that has all the similar effects of alcohol. And then it's only a small amount though, yeah. So what we normally see in bloods is with people with candida overgrowth, they got like this very low level of liver inflammation, kind of like they're drinking a tiny amount of alcohol. It's not through the roof like an alcoholic, but it's just elevated a little bit. And they find they're very like intolerant to alcohol. They find like they have 1-2 drinks, they feel really drunk, or they get really bad hangovers. And that's because like it's that compound effect, right? It's might only be one drink, but it's combined with the gut. Then salsolinol, this is actually implicated with Parkinson's, I believe.
Wow.
And Parkinson's, I could have this wrong, so I'm willing to
Okay.
be corrected. But I believe like Parkinson's is low dopamine. Like Parkinson's, what they use for Parkinson's is dopamine. I think it's L-Dopa, which is like a dopamine agonist, or
Yeah.
it has an impact on dopamine. But salsolinol produced by candida actually can damage these dopamine receptors essentially in the brain and make you less sensitive to dopamine, or which then is going to link into things like anxiety and depression. So we see a lot of the time, like in low motivation, obviously, is a really clear symptom of candida along like as a neurological standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I think candida can have a really significant impact on the brain, and a lot of people just don't necessarily realize it, especially when it's combined with that leaky gut, because it's getting more of it's getting up into the bloodstream into the brain.
Gotcha. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Hey, before I let you go, we have sort of 4 questions that we ask every guest. I don't know if you've been sent them before, but I will just ask you anyway. What's the best advice that you've ever received?
Oh, damn. Never even thought about that before. I have one here on my desk actually, and it's just, what would this look like if it were easy? And I come back to that a lot because it's not necessarily the best advice I've ever received, but it's just more about like coming back to the overwhelm and overthinking and over optimizing. It's just like simplifying and making things easier. So I think for me, that has helped me a lot, like with just, staying on the path and, focusing on what actually matters and going from that. So that doesn't feel like the best piece of advice. I just saw that on my desk, and it's a daily reminder that I have
Yeah.
to focus on that. But I will think about that question more after this, I think, and try and remember what's been
Okay.
the best piece of advice that I've had. That's a great question.
But like the one that you're saying is like, what would this look like if it would be easy? I think it's a great question to ask when you try to tackle something. And I've some great mentors, some world-class mentors, and it often comes back to, if you could parachute into it rather than having to walk up the mountain to get there, or someone else, like, what would be actually ideal? If you could have it all, what would it look like? That type of thing. Or, and often I think it's really, you just have to challenge your thinking to, like, is there a different angle to look at that? Do you know someone who already knows something so that you actually don't have to walk that, but actually ask them, hey, can you make that introduction or something? I think it's a super powerful advice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good insight. That's probably worded better than what I did.
No, no, no. And if you could have a coffee with someone, or green juice or whatever you choose to have, with anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
So I would drink a coffee. Like, I drink coffee every day.
Yeah.
I never drink green juice, actually. So I don't know if people take
Yeah.
that with what you will.
Yeah.
Oh man, you should have gave me these questions before so I
I'm
could
so
be
sorry.
prepared.
Yes, yes.
Any one person, dead or alive.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I sway between relatives and sort of authors of particular books, or sometimes even actors.
yeah.
But normally, yeah, sort of thing.
Such a good question, man. People are coming to mind, but like, I feel like I already have those connections with them through digital, like through consuming their content, through podcasts and books and stuff.
I feel the same.
Like I thought of a few people then who I look up to, but I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it would be wasted. I feel like I almost don't need to do that because
Yes.
we have so much, which I think is almost a bad thing in some respects. Like with social media, like I try not to follow my friends or pay attention to what they do on social media. So when I see them, I can actually be interested and ask them questions.
That's a good
I
one.
think that's a downside of social media for me. Like I know a lot of people do follow what I do, and then when I see them, it's like they know so much about me, but I know nothing about them, and I don't like that. Like it just feels unnatural to a degree. So, yeah, to answer that question, I mean, nah, I don't have anyone. I'm failing these questions.
But you know what? Again, like, I think that's a great reflection. I've been thinking that yesterday. I have a couple of, for me, it's more authors really, that I absolutely love, and I love their content. It's like, well, yeah, sure, I could be friends with them. I could get to know them personally, but nowadays there is a lot of openness around people's thoughts anyway. It's normally not just the book, but there's a blog that comes with it, podcast that comes with it, and so on. And I feel that's almost more respectful to also the person, because they want to live a life. And if I'm correct, then I would probably say most people enjoy being out there and getting information out there, and they get a lot of purpose out there. That's what they make their money with, and so on. But then they also have a curated private life that works for them. And yeah, it's a funny one, that one, but I totally relate to it. Like I get the feeling I know these people already so well, or I get a lot of answers to the questions I would ask them anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. Interesting.
What's your favorite book?
Favorite book? Oh, I got a few favorite books.
Oh yeah.
My one that I love to recommend to people is called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. Have you heard of that?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's a really good book for really, I think, anyone, because it just it teaches through stories. My partner, for example, she absolutely despises self-help kind of style books and self-development and that kind of thing. But she loved that book because it's just telling these stories of these examples in the world. And yeah, something that I always think about is like, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. And like, that's kind of what The Tipping Point is, right? It's about all these little actions that, never seem to amount to anything until they do. And it just tips, it just cascades.
Yeah.
So that's an amazing book. I'm a big fan of biographies as well. Like I love to read biographies. Yeah, they're beautiful. Just a really good insight into someone's life, and also what it takes as well. Like a lot of people look up to their heroes and their mentors
Yeah.
and, compare themselves to that. But when you're looking at someone's outward successes, you also have to understand the price that they paid for those. And that's why I like biographies, because you can see into where they lacked. It's not just survivorship bias where you see, Tiger Woods, for example, he was the best golfer of all time. But then also, would you be willing to pay the price of not having a childhood, to all your marriages failing, to always feeling like you've never accomplished enough? Like, would you really want to make that trade? And most people don't take into consideration the true cost.
Yeah. And condensed. I went a couple of years ago. I went through all the founding fathers, and some of the biographies are decent length, like 1,000 pages and more. And the nuance that you see in their life when you go to that sort of detail is amazing, and you can see patterns, right? Like the attitude that they have, or the strengths that they have, but the public didn't really know that was part of it. Or I guess the public narrative often, well, as you said, on social media, it's often just condensed to a really small amount because people don't want to read the whole book. So just give me the the essence of it. But it sometimes loses how people really got there or how they lived their life overall. And it's such a gift to me. Biographies is just like the biggest gift that you could see. Like someone wants to pass something on, because it's the details that really help you to make the decision of, oh, maybe I could actually adopt some of these mindsets, way of living, like rhythm of their lives and so on. So I'm so with you.
Yeah, for sure. And even social media, like you only see what they want you to. So biographies I prefer over autobiographies, because like you're getting someone else's insight. It's not like
that's right,
curated, this is how I see myself and this is how I tell my story. That can be helpful too, but also like imagine if someone else was making your social media for you, like, and you didn't curate everything that gets shown, then it would look completely different. And we obviously don't show like what we don't want people to see on social media. And that's what can affect people mentally, because they're like, well, how is this person achieving all these things and always so happy and always blah blah blah? It's like, that's because they don't show you the downsides, but they still exist. So I think that's important.
Thanks, man. Last one is, how do you start your day?
How do I start my day?
Do you have a
recently I've had a pretty consistent morning routine. It's just I wake up. I don't set an alarm. I go to bed at the same time. Like, that was actually life-changing. Actually, that's a pretty good piece of advice. Was don't set an alarm in the morning. Set one to go to bed. And that's a game changer.
Yeah, that's great.
So I just wake up. Usually it's because the light comes in. So I wake up around when the sun rises, and then I just straight away go for a walk. I live near the beach. I'm not saying like when I don't live near the beach, I'm not saying that it needs to be a beach, but I just go for a walk in the morning sunlight, about 10, 15 minutes. Sometimes if I'm feeling a bit scattered, I'll do a bit of meditation. Like I'll just sit down at the beach and do a few breaths and just try and see what I'm thinking about, like focus on what I'm actually thinking about. So, and then I come back and I have coffee with my partner and just talk and then get into work. So it's nothing crazy, like no biohacks. Like I've done everything. Trust me, I've done everything. And end of the day, like it didn't stick. And like the thing that makes me feel the best compared to any kind of biohack is like actually just doing what I want to do in my life. Like, getting something done, like for like chasing my purpose, mission, and making a difference. And then obviously I still take care of my health throughout the day. But the morning routine was ending up just being a distraction from actually what really matters. And I think like I say to my clients, like I think that my morning routine, which is literally just go for a walk. So I go on barefoot, like I'm touching the earth, I'm getting out in nature, I'm doing some exercise, I'm getting some natural light, I'm doing some breathing. Like I'm ticking so many boxes in one, and I'm saying g'day to everybody that I kind of walk past. And there's a little bit of social interaction there as well. Like I feel like that's the most boxes you can tick in the least amount of time. So that's what I do.
Thanks for sharing. Awesome. Hey, Charley, that was so insightful. I got a lot out of that, and I'm sure our audience did too. So thank you so much for spending the time with me. Just to remind everyone, so we have the Instagram handle is Holistic Gut Health, correct?
Correct. Yep.
All one word?
Holistic health. Yep. One word.
And then the platform for people can also do a little bit of self research and find some Q&As. That would be the Gut Health Hub.
Yeah, we got the Gut Health Hub. If you come on the Instagram, you'll see what we do. We do Gut Health Hub. And then we also obviously do more the coaching, like the personalized stuff, the blood analysis and the personalized protocols. That's the main two things we do, yeah.
Yeah, and you work online with people too?
Yep, we work with people mainly in Australia, but we got clients all over the world.
Yeah, exciting. Charley, thank you so much for your time, and excited to see where you take it.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Really good interview. Really enjoyed speaking to you and meeting with you.
And same. Thank you so much.
Thanks, bro. Yeah.